We have the honor today to receive Professor Leo Corry from Tel-Aviv University. But before introducing him and starting our conversation with Professor Corry, I would like just to tell you why I created this series and a blog dedicated to critical education. The main reason is that I think universities, but I think also in society at large, we need these kind of spaces where we can have open dialogues about the different challenges that we are facing in university education right now. I think we are living times of disruption, that's clear. I think sometimes with good results and other times with not so good results. And the idea is to overcome fear, to really be open and to have respectful discussions about all the issues. We don't exclude any issue when it comes to university education. And the idea is to do that without canceling anyone or boycotting a country or an institution. It's really to have an open-minded, respectful dialogue about these challenges. But that's the idea of SEC. Then I'm going to present now Professor Corry. He's a mathematician by training. Actually, he graduated in mathematics at the Universidad Simón Bolívar in Caracas, Venezuela. And he's now the Bert and Barbara Cohn Professor for History and Philosophy of Exact Science at Tel-Aviv University. He has a long list of academic publications, books, and articles on history of mathematics in the 20th century and in the Middle Ages. And his papers are well known and in the discipline are frequently cited. At Tel-Aviv University, he was director of the Yavetz School of Historical Studies from 2012 to 2015, and Dean of Humanities from 2015 to 2020. He has translated into Hebrew the books of, for example, Mario Vargas Llosa, La Casa Verde, from Spanish to Hebrew, and Alejo Carpentier's novel Baroque Concert. And he has published also essays on the work of the Argentinian writer Jorge Luis Borges. He has a particular interest in the relations between science and culture in general, and he has been a visiting researcher at the MIT in the States and at the Max Planck Institute in Berlin. Thank you very much, Leo, for accepting this invitation. And the idea now is to have more or less 30 minutes exchange with Leo, and then open the floor for your questions and comments. And Leo, first would like to discuss a few things with us to introduce the subject of today's conversation. Go ahead, Leo.
Thank you very much, Isaac, for the invitation and for the kind presentation. And thank you all for attending this conversation. And I hope that we will make it a vivid interchange. But I want to open, as I am the speaker, I have the privilege to use some of the time at the beginning to throw in some ideas that I think are important for this debate. So let me start with what I call two metaphors about the situation of the humanities, which come from different places and from different perspectives, but I think they will help us focus at least on points that for me are particularly important. The first one has to do with an event that happened in Israel 1 week ago. Suddenly we had in the news that 9 important birds, vultures, it's called a gibbs, which is a protected species in Israel, 9 of them had been poisoned in the southern part of Israel. And the person from the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, who was interviewed in the news, he was almost crying because for him, this is a tragic event. He has devoted his life to the preservation of these species and of others. And he also told about the enormous amounts of money that the government and the society spend on the protection of these species. And suddenly, because of negligence or criminal attitude of someone, they were poisoned. And the achievements of having like 150 of such vultures in Israel after almost they were completely extinct, now they are again in danger. And the interviewed asked him why these vultures are important for us. Why are you so worried about that? And he explained the function of the vultures in nature, you know, to eat the carcasses and to clean nature. And he also explained that places where the vultures have disappeared, there are many plagues and diseases that could be avoided if the vultures were there. Of course, this is right, but I was surprised that this was the answer of someone who is part of the Society of the Protection of Nature in Israel. Because what I expected is an answer that points to the value of protecting nature, not to the profit that we may draw from that, not an utilitarian answer, which are all of them true, but the value. We value nature, we value variety, we value the fact that we, as the most powerful species on Earth, have the duty to protect the species rather than to bring them to extinction. And that was lacking for me. That's the metaphor, because I think that some of the debates about the humanities, and we will speak about that also today, are about the profit, how humanities can help us, be it in the techno-scientific society, be it in our lives. We will speak about that. But I think that we have to start with the question of value. We, as human beings, have created on the surface of the earth, we have done also a lot of damage, but we have also done important things. We have created a culture that spans at least 5,000 years, perhaps more, depending on how we start to count. And we have to respect and to preserve and to be able to bring to the next generation a better environment, a better natural world, and the heritage of so many cultures around the world that have produced such an interesting treasure. And it is the role of the humanities to do that. So I think that any debate about the humanities must start by that. It is a value, and it is our duty as academic people, as citizens, as whatever, to do our best to preserve. This is the first point, okay? Now I move to my second point. And in my second point, I give you another metaphor, which brings us back to the 14th century. This is a scholastic debate. I learned about it from my friend Aviad Kleinberg, who is a very good medievalist that we have in our university. And what the story is that in the 14th century, there was a debate in the Christian world about the role of Jews in history. I advance and say this has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, hatred of Jews, or love to Jews, but a question, a factual question. Because according to the Christian doctrine of the day, it was clear, and it could be seen retrospectively, that Jews, all of the Jews, should have understood the new era in which we live, and they have all converted to the new religion, which is the right one now, the Jews of the spirit rather than the Jews of the flesh before Christ. And why still are Jews around? So there were many debates about that. And one of the reasons, or one of the explanations was that the Jews had a role in the materialization of the prophecies of the apocalypse and the day of the final judgment. They have to be there because at that time, they will have to be the last to convert to the true faith, which is the faith of Jesus. And this was an accepted question, an accepted answer. But there was one, or there may be others, but there is one famous person who did not agree with this accepted answer. This was the philosopher Duns Scotus, a Franciscan theologist, who said, okay, I understand the answer, but then I have to ask you, why do we need so much Jews? I understand that we need the Jews, but why so much? Why so many of them? We can have a selected group. We can put them in an island, and when the day comes for the final judgment, we bring them in, and they do what they have to do according to this explanation. We don't need so many of them. And so I hope that the significance of this metaphor for our debate is clear, because I think that in most places, in most universities, even those that have gone very far in reducing the faculties of humanities and things related to that, people will agree, yes, we need, it's an important, someone has to teach Homerus and someone has to teach the scientific revolution and so on. But why do you need a faculty, with 100 or 200, 300 professors tenured? Come on, that's too much. We don't need all of that. And I bring this point because I think that the question about the humanities in the academic world and outside the academic world has to take into account those two things, those two poles, I would say. One pole is a pole that we all who believe in the value of the humanities have to fight for it, which is to explain and to stress and to promote that value part of the humanities. The humanities play an important role in our being a better society, in our being better people, in bringing the human heritage, the intellectual human heritage, artistic, etc., to keep it. But we also have to face reality. And I now can speak also from experience, because as Isaac said at the beginning, I was a dean. I was a dean for 5 years, and I was also head of the School of History. So I have been in positions where you have to translate the very beautiful words about the value of the humanities and things like that. You have to translate it into hard facts. And if you are able to convince the provost or the administration about the importance of this and that, of that department, that school, and so on, you have to convince them with arguments that they can use when it comes to the discussion about budgets. Because we are not talking here, we're university people, we're not talking here, and that's one of the problems that I see with my colleagues in the humanities. They believe, yes, we have to explain them. Yeah, you have to explain, but then you have to take an Excel worksheet and see how things fit the reality of the university. You have to understand the reality of the university and how the budget works and how the funds are given, etc. And by knowing that, I knew by heart every number in the table. And that's what helped me manage my thinking at the university. By knowing that, you have to explain how you bring your arguments, your requirements, your needs in order to keep that faculty moving. And I think that without being able to do that, then we cannot move anywhere. But then, in order to move that, we have to understand, to have a clear understanding and conception. We, I mean the people who lead the processes, but we also, all the people in the faculty, we have to be able to define and to implement our criteria for what is a good trend in the humanities. What does it mean that for each and every department, you have the right people, the right people are doing the right things in their research, in their teaching, and how this situation also projects to the rest of the university and beyond in the public. So how in our university, the building of the humanities is in the center of the campus. Also because it was the first faculty 70 years ago, 60 years ago, and also because when Tel-Aviv University started, and we can speak about it because history here is very important, was the most important and most influential faculty in all campus. And the faculty lost that primacy. But I took as my task to restore the centrality of the faculty in the campus, not only physically, but also intellectually and academically, which means to find a way to create all kinds of cooperations with the other faculties in both directions, and to have our presence all around the campus, and as I say, beyond, so that there is a meaning to what we are doing, and not just a meaning of what we know. We are big experts. I am a big expert in medieval mathematics. Okay, very interesting. It's good for my career, but is it good for, not in the utilitarian terms, but in the intellectual terms? Is it good for the wellness of the university as a center of knowledge, of creation of knowledge, of learning of knowledge, and so on? So I think that between those poles, we can hold a conversation, and we manage our day-to-day battle in a world that is hostile to the humanities. It is hostile for many reasons, partly because our behavior and our tendency to think that we are so good and so important that we don't need to interact with anyone. That's one thing. But also from the other direction, because the humanities take an effort, require an effort from people to be involved. And we don't live in an era where people like to make efforts. I don't know. I think in the past it was more than that, but I don't want to put things as like an old man speaking about the good old times that were much better than now. They had certain good things. There are certain things that now are better. And then I would say this as my last point, is that before we start our interchange, pay attention, please, that I have been talking about university. But one big problem of the humanities, at least in Israel, but I am quite sure that it is the same outside Israel, is the humanities in high school and even in primary school. So the idea that you can do without a good knowledge of history, a good knowledge of literature, and so on. You know, my final word here would be, I studied in Universidad Simón Bolívar in Caracas, which was a very, very interesting enterprise, intellectual enterprise. I studied mathematics, which by its own nature, it was a technological university. So by its own nature, mathematics was the fact or the career that was closer to the humanities. Because when people don't realize this, I hope you are aware of this. If not, I hope to explain this clearly enough. When you study pure mathematics, especially some of the specialties within that, you are quite far away from the world of technology and of day-to-day, let's say, life in that sense of the world. And for me personally, it appears that it was not an accident that eventually I reached the humanities and devoted all my academic career to that. Because there is something very close between mathematics, but also because the university at that time, the university was open in '69, and I started my studies in '72. Part of the curriculum of everyone, of all the engineers, of all the scientists, was a good doses of humanities. And also in school, we learned also that for me, it was never a question. It was a question of proportion, whether I want to be an engineer, computer scientist, a mathematician, or what I ended up being, a historian with interest in literature, but also in science. So in an ideal situation, there should be no separation between all of these. And I must say that in North America, United States and Canada, you have that great idea of the liberal arts studies, which actually they allow you, especially a young person of 18 years old, let's say, to have 3 years when he becomes an educated person. He or she, they are supposed to be educated from high school. I hope they are in some way. In Israel, the situation is more difficult because people start their university studies at the age of 22, 21, 23, and then to tell him, look, spend 3 years now to become an educated person before you are a doctor or an economist or whatever, that is more difficult. So I think that in those terms, we have to speak about the situation of humanity. Let me just say one last word before I let you, because it's something important for me. When I started my job as a dean, the discourse about the crisis in the humanities was very, very strong. The crisis in humanities here and there. In my first, let's say, strategic decision was to cancel, if I can use a term that Isaac doesn't like, to cancel all that discourse about crisis. Not because canceling the discourse, I canceled the crisis, but people don't like to be losers. And I didn't want to lead a project in which all the time we cry and we say how bad we are. No, we are in a fantastic situation because we have very good scholars in our faculty and in all the world. We have a problem with registration in the BA, and this is something that we have to look at. But the faculty is not in crisis. We're doing a great job. We have to improve. We have to see a lot of things. And I think I would advise to anyone involved in the humanities to try to bring that approach to any debate. There are big problems, but not an intellectual crisis, perhaps an institutional problem or challenge, but not a crisis.
All right.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you for the introduction and these two metaphors that I think are very important: the value and the idea even of the number. I mean, how you justify the number of I don't know, courses or programs in humanities. Then I have a question, and I will switch a little bit. I sent you yesterday some of the questions that I have, but I will switch the order because you said that the issue mainly is not about humanities at the college or university level, but mostly at the secondary education, let's say at the high school level. That's the big problem, because the students then arriving to the different programs, including the sciences or even humanities or social science programs, they have, we can say, a gap in that regard. And my question is, and I've experienced that with my own students, the idea that you don't need memory anymore, because everything is available so easily. I mean, you can Google whatever, a text, a reference, a date, the name of a historical figure, whatever you can now find. And then there is this question, why I need to know those things, let's say, the name of a writer, of a philosopher, or, whatever, because I don't need these things. When I will need them, then it will be easy to find, and that's it. And I think that there is a problematic question between this idea of memory and humanities. And I would like to hear your thoughts about that.
So, yes, thank you for bringing up that issue, especially because I think it appears all around. And I think that really it's not a problem for the humanities, but actually it's an improvement of the situation, because the humanities, I think that your statement applies more to history, let's say. but
not only history.
Not only, but yeah. So you know, I have a good memory, I think, still at my age, and I like it, and it's good for me as a person in the humanities. But I don't think that it's the main thing. The main thing, or there are several things that are much more important. And this is now, if we move from the value, you know, in general that I mentioned of the humanities to the activity of people involved in humanistic studies, then I can mention several things here. One is the ability to build for yourself a general framework of thought from which you look at the universe also, but also at day-to-day life, okay? So each one of us needs to do that, or does that either explicitly or implicitly. And generally it's tacitly and implicitly, and it's based on what we learn from the media, from the TV, or from the street, as we say here, right? From playing football downstairs in the street. People don't do that too much nowadays, but they used to do it. And one of the things of the humanities, perhaps not only of the humanities, but the humanities is good at doing that, is to help you develop a critical language, a critical approach at the world, and the need to question everything that you see in front of you in the newspapers, in the media, and so on, and to bring a general framework of approach to everything you see, everything you do. I cannot see in what page of Wikipedia, which is a very good source in general, you can find that. So you can find many, but still you have to think about it and decide. So this is the first thing. The second thing is a way or a series of skills that allow you to interact with the world, not in that general framework now, which you already develop and change all the time, etc., but in the day-to-day interaction. And here, I think this is one of the things that I think I tried to push that at Tel-Aviv University with some success, not enough. These kind of skills, sometimes they are called soft skills, are very important for anyone in this world, in this technological world. In fact, perhaps it is more. By soft skills, I mean the ability, let's start by this, to read and write as a person. Let's face it, most people don't know how to do that. People don't know to read don't know to read, I would say, and certainly not read critically. And they find it very difficult to express themselves in writing or even orally. Then you have the ability to collaborate or to work in groups by creating an interchange of ideas in a normal way between people, so as to reach agreement or a way to proceed and so on. So these kind of skills are part of what you develop in yourself as part of your studies of the humanities. From my experience, you develop that less in a course on mathematical analysis or any course on the engineering, which are needed if you want to be an engineer. Or a medical doctor, questions about ethics. So, you know, I come from both sides and I know them quite well. When I start my course on the history of mathematics, which I teach every 1 or 2 years, I say, this is a course about history, not about mathematics. And hence, we are going to learn here, we're going to develop and to read about debates, disagreements, points of disagreements, different ways to look at a certain thing, and so on. Now, if you have a good memory, you do it alone. If you don't have, you can rely on what the Wikipedia or whatever source can give you, so that you are in a better position to do what the humanities are supposed to do. And in fact, this is true for that level that I just mentioned, but it is also true, I must say, for the researcher. My research today can do many things that I couldn't do in the past. And instead of trying to remember, if don't remember, things were in books also, right? So you could say you don't need anything, the books are there, but you have to go and pick the book. Now I don't have to go and pick the book comes to me in a way. So it's an advantage for the humanities and not something that makes them superfluous. Okay?
All right, we can have a long discussion about the question of memory, because you need a certain kind of memory, otherwise you won't be able to understand certain things. I mean, if you think that you are the year zero always, that's one problem. I mean, if you think that you are the year zero, that you are starting always something new, that you are really original, that you don't have anything to learn about the past, that also could be an issue, but that's a different discussion.
I would just say that I do fear that the media that we have today, I mean, the technical devices that help us, they do affect our capacities, our memory, and so I'm sure. I mean, I am older than I was 10 years ago and 20 years ago, but I think that's not the only reason why my memory is not what it used to be, simply because I don't try to memorize many things.
Yeah, I know, but it's also the interest of knowing about the past.
Yeah.
The interest of knowing about the past.
Yeah, we can debate that. But the point is clear. The disagreement is clear.
Okay, but then I see that Professor Karimi raised his hand, but before going to his question or comment, I have another question for you, and then we can move to we can open the floor for the questions and comments. And we have the impression now that we have the good humanities, and I'm going to be a little bit controversial here. I mean, the good humanities are those that will question the Western project, meaning, the Western project of culture and history and, and literature and all the canons. And the idea will be to decolonize humanities. That would be considered for some people the good humanities. And then we have the bad humanities, where, the white male, races, etc., impose on the world. I would like to, again, hear your impressions about that debate between good and bad humanities.
Yeah, sure. Which is a central point anyway in any debate of this kind. I can indicate, and I suggest you to look in the internet, an article that was published, I think, 1 week ago in the Stanford Review, and it is called How, just a minute, the Hollowing Out of the Humanities in Stanford, okay? And it is about, and it's specifically about the classics. The classics in Stanford has always been a very outstanding department and so on. And they provide you there the list of courses that are the courses that are compulsory now to the students. And they touch directly on your question, because it is about decolonizing and all kinds of things like that. So, my idea about this is very clear, and it's the following. I am very open to any interpretation, to any new thread or trend or whatever. And we have had many. Like now we are talking about decolonizing. We had feminist views that didn't exist before. We have the so-called spatial turn in the history and many others. All of them, and the digital humanities, about which we can speak, but it's not the same question as you raise now. All of this is good and probably will lead to many good things, and there also will lead to many things that will be thrown into the garbage can after they were published. But there is one condition, and the condition is that you know what you are talking about, and that you can like the canon and you can dislike the canon, and you can believe that the canon has to be modified or broadened or whatever. But if you are going to approach with a new view, let's say the Homer's writings, right, in the case of the classics, I cannot accept in any way that you do that without reading the classics. Okay, so it's okay that you have a new view, and it's important that you make a new analysis based on post-colonial ideas or postmodern ideas that are already outdated now, but once they were the new cry of the fashion and so on, because all of these things contribute, and you have always had fads in classics, in everything. Some of them disappear and some of them stay. But if you don't read Homerus, don't talk to me about Homerus. If you don't read Borges, don't talk to me about Borges, and so on and so forth. So you have to do you have to have a solid scholarship about the topics that you are talking about, and then you are free to do what you want. And I am free to criticize everything that you do, to either the point of view or the specific analysis that you go in. And I think that the problem now, as far as I can see it in the United States, and I don't claim to have a complete view of what is going in the United States, but I have some things I know. I know also in Israel, things that happen in the United States and happen in Israel after 15 years. So I know, but I think that the problem is a confusion between changing the point of view and believing that you can make an analysis without doing your job as you do. It may be reading the classics, the corpus that you're analyzing, or going to the archives and look at the letters or whatever. And people think, they have always thought, by the way, that you can just talk without knowing what you're talking about because you are using the right language and the lexicon. And the more you use the lexicon, you will. And unfortunately, I know of many colleagues and commissions and things like that fall into the trap, and they prefer people or works that follow the same lexicon and the same style that they follow or don't follow, depends on your side, rather than trying to apply a criteria of excellence that include, first of all, a good knowledge of the sources, first of all, and paramount.
Right, thank you. Then I will invite now Professor Karimi to ask his question or make his comment, and then we have after him Professor Arusso from Montreal. Please, Professor Karimi, go ahead.
First of all, I would like to thank you, Isaac, for inviting me to this event. This is the first time that I'm attending. I'm a physicist, actually, with a background in mathematical physics as well. So thank you very much, Professor Corry. It was fantastic. And there were a couple of things that I want to bring it up, and I want to echo what my colleague Isaac mentioned. So, I mean, the humanity, basic sciences, as you described, they are linked somehow together. And all of them, they are curiosity-driven knowledge. So during the history, we had curiosity and we looked into the nature, and then we look how the nature works, and we try to find a way to respect all sides of the nature. So, I mean, nature by itself is a little bit harsh because it doesn't allow weak to survive, and is again always biased towards the strongest. So, however, as human, we thought that we should respect this, and that maybe have a long history, but we should not forget that only 80 years ago, we had, roughly speaking, about 80 years ago, we had a war which 80 million people, they died. So this, although we thought about the rights of the people, rights of the different diversities and different people, but we should be really careful because these are not a stable situation. We see very, very, very dangerous things that may happen in the world. Some part of that we can change it, some part of that we cannot change it because it's beyond the control of humanity. On the other side, that I just want to echo what my colleague Isaac mentioned. I have seen this just 2 years ago when after 15 years I decided to teach for undergraduate students. And I was very, very surprised that students, they were not able to answer the question of what is -1 power of 2. Believe me, I'm not joking. In the class
I
of
believe
200,
you.
yeah, class of 200 people, more than 10%, they didn't know what is the answer. And when I gave them the right to use calculators, they were fantastic. They were amazing. But without the calculators, they were not able to do simple calculations. That brought me to a question that exactly echoes Isaac's thought, that people are more now based on equipment, based on the electronics, based on the Wikipedia, which is not bad in some sense. But I'm afraid that they lose the logic, they lose the framework of the thoughts. So how they should analyze, first of all, what are the proper resources? Because I think Professor Chantal kindly mentioned that we are driven by the algorithms, which is depending on the location, depending on the population, where you are searching, and many, many other things which is behind of these, enterprises like Google, IBM, and etc. And on the other side, what I'm worried is that the next generation, they don't have the thoughts, they don't have the ability to analyze and finding the proper way, proper resources, and giving the boost. I don't want to say that what we learn is the proper way, but I see flaws and loopholes in this system.
Okay, a comment, Leo, please.
Yes, thank you for these two questions. And I see indeed that Professor Oroser already wrote this. So I will refer to what you wrote, Professor Oroser, and also connect. So if you want them to add,
yes,
it will be
please, Chantal.
Yeah.
Please.
So the first question,
Okay.
of course, I mean,
okay.
You said 30 million people were killed in the war, but and you only suggested, but I will say that most of this was done by the people for which the humanities, or which helped develop the humanities, perhaps more than any other people in the world, which were the Germans. So I am very far away from believing that the humanities is the cure for everything, and that if we read the Odyssey properly, or we learn Kant's critiques, then the world will necessarily avoid falling into those disasters. However, I do believe that each one of us will have a better life, first of all, and our communities will have a better life, the more these kind of things are part of our day-to-day way to interact. And they are part of a world in which they are every time more and more gradually disappearing from it. So absolutely, this is not the cure for everything. And well, the German example, we always have it here and we cannot forget.
Okay.
As for the second one, look, this is a very interesting point, and I could say a lot from the point of view of the history of mathematics, in which you had many skills that people knew and were very good at in antiquity, in the Middle Ages, in the Renaissance, and we don't even know them anymore, right? For example, using an abacus and things like that. So, you know, we are very close to what we do, and when such things disappear, we are worried about that, right? I had a fantastic ability to calculate in my mind when I was 10 years old, and everybody say, wow, you're a genius, you know, to do that, all calculations. And now I have to think quite hard, and usually I prefer to do it with a machine. And then the question is whether that is bad. And that's a big problem, because we even felt it like in the 6th of October. I remember very well because I traveled. Suddenly we were 6 hours without WhatsApp. And you know, nowadays we have hackers and things like that. So our knowledge, the basis of our knowledge and all of that is in constant danger, right? So, you know, I don't use any more paper. I don't have any paper on my desk. I barely buy new books in print, and all of this may disappear one day. I am aware of that, but you know what calms me a little bit, it's an idiot's way of being calm, is that Many more important things will be damaged before the draft of my last book, which is now, I store it usually in 4 or 5 places at the same time. I also work in the high-tech industry, in the storage industry. So I like to keep many copies, but all of this can be destroyed also, right? So, the other point that I want to stress, and this comes up very clearly in what you said, also what Professor Llosa said, is about Google. I said Wikipedia and all of that. I didn't mean that in that way. For example, when I have to write an article and I have to mention some mathematician, and I usually like in an article to put the name and the dates. That's my style. So I don't have to remember the dates when Fibonacci died or wrote his book. I can look at it at the Wikipedia. That's what I mean. Never, ever I will base my research and the new ideas that I want to bring in and my analysis on what Google says. I will never do such a thing, because I am the one who had to produce the material that then Wikipedia or whoever are going to use it. But on the other hand, I can tell you something. You know, my first research was about mathematics in Germany in the late 19th century. It's not so long ago, right? But every time I needed an article, I have to ask it from someone in the United States or in Germany, or to fly there and bring 3 articles because I don't have it. Now I am in 19th century, of course, everything is on the web, but I am working on manuscripts of the Middle Ages, of which there is one in the world, and it's on the web. I don't have to travel anyway. I can do it at home. So my situation as a researcher in the humanities in that sense is much better than it was in the past by far. And we can do all kinds of things that we do with friends and so on. So I am not worried about that. But yes, there is a technical problem which doesn't have to do with the humanities. It has to do with the world. We are in a no return point. Everything is based on that, wanted or not. Your salary, your pension, your medical files, everything in the army, you know, they don't have it. They don't write down where the next atomic bomb is stored. It's all on the web, hopefully protected. I am not sure about that as well, but let's say it is protected, okay? So yes, there is a problem, but this is a problem, a general problem, not one of the humanities in particular.
Okay. Now, Professor Rousseau, please, your question or comment.
Well, I'm, as Karimi said before, or Ibrahim, said before, it's my first time with this forum too, and I don't get to speak English often, so maybe I will be looking after my words a little. First, a very actual example of how humanities are going away. In a very recent article in one of our great newspaper, they recalled that all the high schools in Laval, which is the island just near Montreal, so in the suburb of Montreal, but a second largest suburb, or the second largest city in Quebec. They were trying to do promotion for professional education in high school. And to do so, the messages they sent out to the whole population and to the younger ones too was, you don't want to lose your time anymore with philosophy, literature, English, and all those, words. You can go right to what you want to do, and that's really how you promote education in high schools. So, of course, the message was taken out was taken away from the public very soon. But the meaning stays, and the sense and what is really believed behind it stays, and it's preoccupying. But then I'm coming back to the first part of your presentation when you were doing this. You were talking about the faculty and the fact that the faculty could be promoted even if the programs were not so attractive anymore. And what I see is it's also part of your argumentation for, well, of course we can do our jobs more easily and maybe more intensively and maybe better with all the resources we now have access to by internet. But if people, younger ones, don't come to our programs because we're not speaking in all our programs of technologies. We're not speaking in all our programs of communication sciences, but all that interests the younger ones, the ones that come to university, is to know how internet communication, social networks work. And when we're talking about human relations and interactions in real life, like you and me, and when we're talking about conflicts that we have to go through, their feeling is that it's past, it's history, and it's no more of any use. And because of that, our programs are prerequisiting. We don't have enough admissions. And if we don't have enough admissions, the whole structure of the Department of Communication will be affected. And if the structure of the communication program is affected, then all that's about communication will be taken in account by other disciplines, but never with the fine tuning and the fine activity and the fine, the specific ways we can do it while we're a discipline. So the discipline might disappear as religion also disappeared. Well, I'm not religious, but speaking and scholarly knowledge of religions is part of humanities. But if no one gets interest, the program disappears and the faculty will disappear too. So I'm not sure how you managed as a dean to promote the faculty while the programs were not up to the standards, and when society goes in a way where the reality of human communication is of very little interest to more and more of us.
Well, this is a very difficult question, but I will try to answer because I had to face this problem, right? So I had to do something, but first, let me quote an important philosopher who is the legendary ex-manager of the New York Yankees, Yogi Berra. Who is famous for his sayings, right? He said, if the people are not going to the park, no one is going to stop them from doing that, right? So that's a problem if people don't want to come. And it will not help that we will, go out crying, the young people don't want. So I think that we have to face reality. And we have to understand if, for example, those things that you mentioned, to the extent that they affect really the life of the young people and so on, or are part of it, we cannot ignore that, right? So here is one point of others that I thought about in terms of trying to change our programs so that they become more attractive to students. But I have to say, a person who is not interested in literature, who is not interested in history and philosophy, he will never come to a faculty of humanities. The people, the young people that we have the responsibility to make a better program for them are the students who in principle would like, at least partly, to have in their studies some of that material and some of those classes, and perhaps even to have a BA in history and so on and so forth. But they are afraid of doing that because they say, what's going to happen when I finish? Where do I go? And probably their parents, some of them maybe even those who have an MA in history or whatever, are saying, don't do that. You have to study accountant or something like that. So, but what can we do? So I'll tell you one important thing. In Israel, at least, and I am sure that not only in Israel, all study programs for humanities and not only humanities were conceived in a way as if each student that is coming now to the university will one day become a professor in some university. So the idea was how to create correctly and educate correctly someone who will be a professor of history, let's say, or of literature. And hence, all most of the hours were devoted to that. And if you told to the head of the Department of French Studies that it's better to have 4 hours less of French, of some medieval French or modern French, and then give a course on literature on the internet today, they would say that you are crazy because you are destroying the canon and I don't know what. But if you don't do that, then you will not have any students. So the point is that most of the students who come to study French or philosophy will not be French scholars and will not be philosophers. After 3 years, they will move to some other field. They will go out to the job market or I don't know what. So what I thought is correct to do is to change a little bit the program. I would tell it even in numbers. We have double programs, 120 hours. Let's say one in 60 hours in history, 60 in literature. First of all, have joint programs with the sciences. We have many students now, not enough, but many, who study half mathematics, half history, or half philosophy. Philosophy is more popular. And then within that, you have to, people who studied humanities, they ask you, what will I do when I finish? I have to work, I have to earn a living, right? So you said, we take the last 8 hours, we take the first 8 hours and make a common hours for all of the humanities so that someone who studies French will know something about American history as well. And then in the last 8 hours, if the person now thinks that he will go on and become a professor, he will study another elective course on French or whatever. But if not, we are helping him with courses on language edition on the web, a touristic guide, things that are actual will use the background that he gained in his studies, but will help him go to the job market or to move to another specialty and so on. And I think that this has helped some percentage of students who were hesitating, wanted to study the humanistic studies, but they had many fears about that, to reduce a little bit the degree of fear that they have. This is not a complete answer, but I think it may help.
All right, thank you, Leo. Thank you, and merci beaucoup, Chantal, aussi pour la question. I don't know if someone else has a question or a comment before we close this conversation. Any additional comment or question? Just I would like to remind you that our next talk will be with Professor Arusso on Wednesday, December 1st in French at 2 p.m. Ottawa time. And Professor Arusso will be talking, and then I will read in French and try to translate Nouveaux risques de l'enseignement en ligne en dialogue avec la professeure Arusso. New risk about online teaching. And I think those who have experienced online teaching know about this risk, particularly the risk of the students either falling asleep or don't pay any attention. Yes. Well, I was telling my students what I see now with Zoom are these black boxes with names, sometimes even not the names. Then I told them, I hope you're still there. I told them yesterday, I hope, because otherwise it would be a waste of time. Okay, thank you very much, Leo. What's very interesting, and I think this is still an open debate. We haven't finished yet to, because I think it's as you said, I mean, things are changing and we cannot deny that. Certainly, we cannot deny that, but also we have also the mission, I think, to preserve some of the good things. I mean, that's also, I mean, there is the question of legacy also. We have that responsibility somewhat.
Heritage. Yeah.
But heritage. But also we cannot resist change. It would be foolish. Then thank you, muchas gracias, Leo. Thank you very much. And I will see you then, hopefully, je vais vous voir encore le 1er décembre avec la professeure Arusso pour notre prochaine conversation. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for the invitation.
And then we have a message in Spanish here, just
I saw it. So I wanted to thank people who gave me good feedback, because First of all, I don't see you, but it's always good that I was able to elicit some positive thoughts on you. Also, my friend now from Torrealba, from the USB, always to meet people who are connected to my alma mater is important. I can tell you interesting stories about that. And all of you who thanked me, all of you who attended in silence, and Isaac, of course, for the invitation and for the good job. This is very important what you are doing.
All right, thank you, Leo, and thank you, everyone, and à la prochaine.
À la prochaine.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.